welcome to the Matching Mom Jeans podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Shelby.
So, we got to hear a lot about your trip, but something that I really wanted to touch on this week is kind of the difference between a vacation designed around rest. Um, laying on the beach or taking days off work to just like my husband just did a staycation for a couple of days where he took off work and we just did some things around the house and played outside and watched an entire season of a TV show. But obviously, you didn't do that while you were on vacation. You really probably did several exhausting things. And so, my question is, how do you rate rest versus rejuvenation? And how do you feel like that fits into the world of parenting?
I think that you have to be at a certain level of rested before the rejuvenation can really kick in. Because I was never that person when I was like sleep deprived in the newborn stage who people would be like, you don't need to take a nap. You need to take a shower and get outside. No, I was not that person. I needed a nap. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
and
so,
that's very
assuming your
real.
essential needs are met, rejuvenation is so good. It's so good for me to be in a different place, creating different memories, trying different things. My confidence is high. My joy level is high. Like it's different for me than if I would have just taken a long weekend or even a week off and done like a staycation or even just laid on the beach or something. But my husband and I have never really done a chill
Yeah,
hangout kind of vacation.
I do have to say your vacations are like, let's go on a million hikes. And my
We
vacations are
adventure
like, let's
vacation.
yeah, my vacations are like, can you bury me in sand? And I
Right.
can take
If
a
you
nap?
if I could get this book in both physical format and audiobook so that when I flip over, I can read the physical copy. But then when I'm on my back and the sun's in my eyes, I could just listen to it. That would be great.
That
That's you
is
on
100
vacation.
That's 100% my life, and that's exactly what I wanna do, but I do often wonder, and I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with people in my sphere as fellow, like, parents who are disabled, is that rest deficit is so prominent throughout our lives that it is something where, like, sometimes you almost have to turn that part off and go ahead and do the rejuvenation to fill up your cup because you're never gonna I mean, like, let's be honest, the last time I got sick, I wanted to do what I did prior to being a parent, and I wanted to sleep for 18 hours. Like, I knew, like, if I could just sleep for 18 hours, I'd be golden. But instead, I had to focus on, like, I'm gonna make my favorite foods, and I'm going to watch my favorite TV shows and snuggle my baby and try to focus on, a life worth living and getting over this RSV. so so I can get back to it. And I do think there's a really hard balance. Like you said, your basic needs have to be met. And as parents, there's so many sayings of like moms don't take sick days. And it's so true. I mean, while you were gone, actually, my one of my sons gave the other son the flu. And then I got the flu because I'm
Ugh.
immunocompromised. And it was a nice like 48-hour bug. Like he really did rock it out. And um but 24 hours in, I started. So then there was an entire day where it was beautiful, 68 degrees outside, and he wanted to go outside and play. And I we had this old ottoman that we were planning on getting rid of anyways. And I dragged that thing outside and sat on it because that was all I could do to survive. And
Sittervising.
yes, exactly, sittervising. And I brought out the chalk, I brought out the bubbles, and I just said, "Enjoy your life, stay where I can see you." And it worked. And I would almost argue that that was a balance of rest and rejuvenation, because being outside was wonderful, and not feeling, you know, inappropriate mom guilt about, oh, I've kept my baby inside all day. I'm a horrible mom. Like, there was this like balance there of like, I didn't necessarily need to feel mom guilt if we'd stayed inside, but having that moment of like, I did a good thing for my son today while also getting some rest can be a revival in and of itself. And so, how do you feel like that balanced while you were on this big vacation? Because if I went to anywhere for 2 weeks, I'm going to come back and crash and be in a coma. Like, just a nice light coma for a couple weeks, and then I'll be okay again. But it doesn't seem like you really needed that. As exhausting as, 24 hours of travel and 10-hour plane rides, you seem to be balancing really well.
Well, thank you. That is just on the outside. No, it's not really. I mean, there's so it's there's a lot of prep that goes into making sure that you will have some rest when you get back. Like I freeze meals before we leave on a trip so that when
Oh,
I
that's
come back,
awesome.
we just have things made. I froze milk so that I didn't have to, because we're on whole milk now, lactose free. And like I froze it so that we had milk that could be thawed for her to have milk for the first couple days so I didn't have to run to the grocery store when we first got back. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
prep that goes into that. There's a certain amount of type A you have to be to make it look the way I make it look. But
that's fair.
also I don't know that it's super fair, even you and I talking all the time every day, like I'm not often the kind of person to just be like, I am freaking exhausted,
Yeah.
because there's a certain level of like, I expected to be tired and I am tired. And so to me, it's not always super noteworthy, but I do think a lot of prep helps. I do think a lot of like, you know, laying on the ground while my toddler also lays on the ground because she was tired too. That's the other thing. Is like she's tired, she's having a hard time, but we have an understanding where like I knew that was going to be a hard day for her. I knew it was going to be a hard day for my husband. I knew it was going to be hard for myself. And so expectations were on the floor, maybe below the floor. We might have dug a little trench and put them in there for a while, and that helps so much create like an environment for the rest that we needed. But I think it's really, really important to know that when you are able bodied, I know this is not the case for you, but when you are able bodied, there's a certain mindset when it comes to that kind of exhaustion where, like, I know I will feel rested again. I know jet lag is temporary.
That's a good perspective to have. I had a friend in college who always said that if you lower your expectations, you raise your opportunity for surprise and lower your threshold for disappointment. And when she first had that conversation with me, I was like, wow, that's kind of sad that you're just like walking around. Like she would always say, like, my expectations are so low because I don't want to deal with disappointment and I want to experience everything as a surprise. And I honestly judged her for that. I was like, that sucks. Like, you could raise your expectations, but it really is a lifestyle that sometimes I have to embrace. And I mean, I just had a conversation with my husband um about kind of balancing the really rejuvenating, reviving concept of getting back into the field of work, and also making sure that I'm balancing that with rest, because I do have this very specific full-time job of keeping 3 children, well, two and a half if you count that one's at college, alive, and keeping them fed, and balancing his full-time job with the military, and he's building an airplane, and he's going to school for his master's. And so there are kind of these extra time fluctuations that happen throughout the week. And I feel like you do have to balance that with rest. And At the same time, I could sit for hours and do some of my reading and my research and feel like I have totally poured into my cup. But if you don't have that rest, if you don't have those basic needs like you were talking about, that can feel really um what is it when you have to patch the holes in your pitcher before you can pour into someone else or something?
Right?
What is that? Like
You
it's
can't
like
pour from an empty cup, but you also can't pour from one with a hole in the bottom. I mean, you
yes.
can, but you're going to have to pour into it at a great rate if you are both pouring out of it and it's leaking.
Yes, and that's kind of what parenthood feels like. It feels like for all of the things that are on you, you do have this kind of like small crack in your jug that you cannot that you're pouring from, and it's just like a little bit extra energy leak that you have going on. Um
Well,
and
kind
I
of going back to the conversation about expectations, lowering your expectations also for the cup metaphor lowers the level that you think you need to be full in order to have the ability to pour out.
oh yeah,
If
and maybe
you adjust your expectations for a week like this, a week where I am jet lagged and my toddler is jet lagged, and my husband hasn't worked in 2 weeks and now has so many deadlines, and he's being sent across the country in a few days for a
which is
work trip
wild.
that they rescheduled. And so it's like, we have so much going on. And I realize that we cannot live in a constant state of crisis, but there are some people who do. But
Oh yeah.
we can adjust. We have it within our capacity right now to adjust our own expectations, to adjust what a good day looks like for us over the
Yeah.
next few days while we are adjusting from this trip. Just like we had it within our capacity to adjust what a good day looked like on our trip. Taking a 2 week trip with a toddler internationally, you are going to have to budget for disappointment. You're going to have to budget for rest that was unexpected, or things that were closed, or tantrums that caused you to miss a bus. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they are
Well,
going to happen.
like you
And
said, I mean, I think you said this last week is that the restaurants close right around bedtime
oh,
or they're
yeah,
not open.
they're
And
not even
so,
open.
accepting the reality of like, okay, we can still have really good dinner, but we're going to eat takeout after we get the child down for bed. Like, you could look at that as, oh, this sucks so bad that we didn't get to go to this nice restaurant. Or you could look at it as, hey, we get a little bit of a quiet date night with really good food. And I think
Yep.
framing has such a big impact. If you had to, I'm going to challenge you for a minute. If you had to name three things that are rest and three things that are rejuvenating for you, what do you think they would be?
Oh my gosh, why would you do this to me? I couldn't
Well, because
answer this
I,
question if you gave me like 3 business weeks to work on it. Okay,
well, so,
rejuvenating, that's easier to do.
okay, do that.
Like, I find quality time, like with my husband and my daughter, or one or the other, quality time to be rejuvenating.
Okay,
I find walking outdoors to be rejuvenating.
okay,
And I find cooking a meal uninterrupted to be rejuvenating.
that's so real.
It's so
That one,
specific, but it is so real. Like, there
oh
is something
man,
just glorious about from the moment you take the first ingredient out to the time that you set the table and you say dinner's ready, or buon appetito, as they say in Italy, like that. And nothing interrupts you. No one interrupts you. The dog doesn't need let in from the backyard. Nothing happens. No one calls you.
yeah,
Your audiobook does not even pause the whole time. It's
yeah.
just like, that is so rejuvenating to me. And I feel like that's a very specific list, but it is. But like rest, I don't know why, but I'm thinking of when you're like sitting in the car waiting on your grocery pickup order. That's
No,
rest.
that's right there on my list. Like for
There's nowhere else
me,
to be.
yeah. For me,
Um,
I would identify, I think my rest list is a little bit easier because when I think of rest, I think of no longer being overstimulated. So you have like basic body rest, which is I'm going to put my feet up and I'm going to, um, lay down or whatever. And I often, like, I lay down with my son to get him down for a nap often because I'm still breastfeeding. And so to me, that's a great moment of rest. But it's also it can be kind of annoying because it's like, "Oh, I really wanted to get something done," or, thinking of the next things. And so intentional rest in those moments matters. But then there's also I would consider rest, being in the car. Even if I'm driving, my body's physically doing something, but there's this kind of beautiful moment where there is nothing else I'm supposed to do. There is nothing else that I can be doing. And I know that my children are safe. So I'm not, rushing through this thing. And then I would say maybe the other one is for me, um, just what was I going to say? I do find it really restful to sit with my husband and all the kids are asleep. And there's just this moment where I'm at the end of the day. Like I am so physically exhausted that I literally give myself permission to rest. But rejuvenating's a little harder because, like you said, it's hard to do that when your physical, like your basic needs need to be met. So for me, talking to another adult can be really rejuvenating, but it can also be exhausting. Listening to an audiobook or a podcast or music can be really rejuvenating, but it could also be really overstimulating. And I think that's the same with having a good meal. Like I love sitting down and eating a good meal that I've worked hard on, but sometimes the idea of having to create a meal plan and um get the ingredients and put it all together and plan out how long, like it just occurred to me that I was supposed to start slow cooking a roast today and I have not done it yet, so dinner may be a few minutes late. But I think those things can be rejuvenating and you can take pride in those moments, but it is kind of a conversation that rolls into how overstimulating parenting can be and how um, overstretched, I guess, stretched really far we can be. And some of those things that you would consider to be rejuvenating can also be really overstimulating. So I think that's did you have any moments? Because I have had those moments where I've been on vacation with the littles and I have felt like something that I normally love, like the ocean sounds. I'm like, okay, I've got to get away from this water because it's overstimulating to me. It's too much. Did you have any of those while you were traveling?
oh, we had several nights of overtiredness, overstimulating kind of moments, especially like the first night in our Airbnb in Rome. My daughter was very, very, um, I think she was just kind of weary. She'd never been in that place. It had been a strange day. She had been on an airplane, like, those kinds of things. And so she was very,
Yeah.
very upset.
She was probably even wondering when the next location change was going to be.
Well,
She's
she
like,
could
"Are
have
we here?
been. Yeah.
Are we here for
She
a
could have
little
been
while?"
like, am I going to wake up here? Am I going to
Yeah.
fall asleep here and wake up here? And a lot of times when I'm rocking her, I will like listen to music or listen to an audiobook. And I had an audiobook that I was trying to finish before the library took it back.
Yeah.
Which
That
is
rush is always hard.
the it's the race I'm always running over here. But like I didn't want anybody to talk to me. I couldn't listen to anything. I couldn't nothing. I didn't want anything helpful. And so those kinds of moments always happen. But for me, it's just the taking the deep breath, the focusing on one priority at a time. So for me, in those moments, like I have to get her calm and to a place where she can rest, even if it's not sleeping yet or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I have to kind of like wiggle my toes and unlock my jaw and bring my shoulders down from my ears and kind
That's
of like back
exactly
myself off of it before I can really get to a point where I'm like, all right. What are
That's
we going to do
exactly
next?
what I was about to ask you is like, in order to get to the point where you can be restful or you can go through a rejuvenation of kind of your energies, is there any rituals that you do? Because I started when I was pregnant doing this weird mantra, and I didn't get it from anywhere. I just one day was like, "Ugh, I feel like there's so much negativity," because there was a lot of fear in my pregnancy. And I was literally like, I'm going to breathe out all of the negativity and anxiety. And then I'm going to breathe in like positivity and peace. And I still do that. I will still have those thoughts when my son is having a tantrum or I'm feeling a lot of stress. And it's become a strange ritual that I kind of fall back on, but I don't really even have to think about. And I mean, it sounds like you kind of have that like unlock your jaw and relax your shoulders and kind of get back into your body. Do you
Yeah,
feel like
for me being overstimulated, I do feel it. I am not I'm not in my head. I'm a verbal processor, and if I can't verbally process because there's a baby right there or whatever, a lot of times the anxiety builds in my body. Um and so that has been one thing with having a child is if I'm in a
yeah,
place that I cannot express myself, it expresses in my body, and so I get very tense muscles, or I my toes are literally curled in my shoes, and so checking in with my body is the most important thing I have to do to get over overstimulation.
yeah,
But to rest regularly, to have a rhythm of rest in my life, I try to build it into my routines, but I also try to identify what prohibits me from resting. And so, for example, like I clean up toys once a day. Okay, we do not clean up the toys
oh yeah,
individually. We clean up
I
toys after bedtime. That is when toys get cleaned up. She is now at an age, she's 15 months old. She's now at an age where she will help after dinner before bedtime. But we're talking like, could you help with the blocks? Like, that's it.
yeah,
I'll take care of the rest. Or can you put your books on the shelf? Like, that's it.
yeah,
And so I clean up toys once a day. That means that during nap times or during periods of time when I'm like, it's a Saturday, my husband's home, he's gonna chill with her for a minute while I get some stuff ready or whatever. I cannot be in the room with the toys. I can't
yeah,
be in the living room if the toys are out. I can't do the thing. I can't be in the room that I plan on being in for the rest of the time.
yeah. Do you want to know what my favorite thing that I've started doing is? It's a little embarrassing. So we have all of our toys. So we have like a big tote because we've got two children. And so we have a kind of like good sized tote, and it's on top of a rug that I got the boys that has like, like kind of like a library rug where it has the roads on it and it has airports on it and everything.
I love a
And
road
so
rug.
yeah. So we've started with the boys of like, even if you can't put it in the tub, like let's say, because our middle one has some particularities about how he leaves his cars, they have to be in a perfect line. Um, and that really upsets him at the end of the day. He's like, I can't break up my line to put them in the tote. And so we've started this new thing of like, get them on the rug. Just put them on the rug. And so if you are playing with something that you don't want messed up, you can still have it on the rug. It doesn't have to go in the tote. Um, except that some days that looks like me taking our Swiffer and just bulldozing it. Like you see the people on basketball courts like sweeping the dust with the big wide brooms. I just scoop it to where it gets on the rug sometimes so that we can sweep or we can vacuum or we can walk through the living room without stepping on a block or a car. And there are days where that counts for me. It is there. My husband has programmed the Roomba, which I dearly wish we used our Roomba. But there's a lot of cords and a lot of toys, and we haven't used it yet. But he programmed it to go around the rug. So when we do use it, it's completely safe. Like just get things on that rug and you're fine. Um, and I feel like you're right. Like there are some little tips and tricks that work for your specific household that you can do. And um, I think you and I have personally talked about fair play and how you divvy up household chores and things like that. And I think there's this really beautiful part of having a co-parent where you can have the conversation of what will help you rest. And like at our house, my husband hates loading the dishwasher, but he doesn't care about unloading it. So right then and there, we have a perfect divide where I will load the dishwasher and when it's clean, he unloads it. And that cuts the dishes in half. It is a perfect half of the workload. Um and I think that's a really it's an important conversation to have. I may even link the Fair Play website in the show notes because I think that it's an important journey for everyone to take. And one day I'd love to do like a full episode on it because I do think it's this incredible strategic conversation and tool that people have. But I know that you specifically have done this huge work into Fair Play and how you divvy things up, and you have this beautiful wall on the side of your
Yeah, we
pantry.
don't have an invisible load in our house. The wall holds it.
Yeah, and so
Like
what does
it's not
that
my mental load, it's not his mental load, it's the wall's load.
I like that.
It's
How
literally
do
a load
you
bearing wall.
I like it. Yeah, it's you
But
can't lose it.
all that ties into like expectations because you can rest when your expectations are met. You can rest when you can't you can when your expectations are met, you can rest more easily. When you rest more easily, you have moments of rejuvenation more easily. And so like no, you may not. And they're just all intertwined. Like no, you may not be fully rested. I may not get a full night's sleep 2 nights in a row until my child is like 10. At this
Yeah,
point, I have given up. I've given up. But I can function on at least 5 hours.
yeah,
If I get 5 hours, and that's the thing is my expectation is no longer 8 hours. My expectation is not in bed by a certain amount of time, waking up by a certain amount of time. My expectation is if I can get 5 hours, whether it's on the floor of the nursery or in a rocking chair, or it's 3 hours and then it's 2 hours.
yeah,
Like, I have that expectation so that I can meet that expectation so that I can be rested. And
yeah,
that expectation has been communicated to my husband, and he knows. He knows that if I look at him at 6 a.m. and I say, I've been up 14 times, I think I probably got 3 hours of sleep. He knows there's a
yeah.
deficit, and the whole family's feeling that deficit
I wish
unless
that was
something is done.
a conversation that we had more as people were beginning their journey into parenthood. Because I do think that there's such a weird conversation around everything from sleep training to postpartum taking care of yourself and all of these things where if we really I mean there's a whole conversation in the breastfeeding world around like this is going to be really freaking hard for the first 3 months. If you can make it 3 months then you're doing great. But until then you're struggling. And that made a massive difference in my experience. And I think if
Because
there
you
was
had expectations.
yes, and I think if we had a conversation with uh, new parents, whether or not they're going through the adoption process or whether or not they're fostering or they're pregnant at that time or want to become parents, if we had the conversation of like realistic expectations, and of course it's a hard conversation. It's a hard conversation to quote unquote burst someone's bubble. It's a hard conversation to be realistic about what
Well,
individuals' lives look like.
it's not even
Um,
that. It's an ongoing conversation because
yeah,
I could not have defined my needs while I was pregnant accurately. I could not have defined my needs postpartum in the early weeks. I could not have accurately defined these needs 6 months ago. It's an ongoing conversation. The conversation that needs to be had, though, is when you realize your new needs, when everything you know has been torn down and you are rebuilding as this mother with these priorities, as this parent, whatever's going on, you're rebuilding. once you know a need, once you know how to define an expectation, communicate it, respect it. Don't try to compare it to what that need used to be. Don't make the conversation how little sleep you get compared to, 25-year-old you, double income, no kids. Make the conversation how much sleep you're getting versus how much sleep you need, and it's going to be a lot closer.
Yeah. That's that's a really good way to frame that because it is a really hard conversation to my chair squeaked. um but it is a hard conversation to have, and I think one thing I'm grateful for being in like the world of chronic illness and disabilities is you do have this ongoing conversation every single day of what am I able to do today? And I think that has really changed my experience with parenting. But even then, it's a constant struggle to really be realistic with yourself, to really have the understanding of like, I woke up today and I wanted to do these, you know, it's taken me 4 days. I just moved our couches and vacuumed and mopped behind them just because it's a thing I try to do every 6 months or so. But I've been trying to do it for since Friday. I mean, today is Tuesday. And I had to lower the expectations for multiple reasons. One of them was energy. One of them was because my son was having a hard weekend. One of them was because I needed my husband's help moving the couches. And so I had to be ready to do it at the same time he had to. There had to be this magical overlap in what we were able to do. And, I think it's a moment of honesty and reflection with yourself before. I think it'd be easy to put it on other people of like, you need to communicate, your co-parent needs to understand your expectations, blah, blah, blah. But I do think it's a reflection in the mirror of, can you be honest with yourself about what your boundaries are and what your limitations are? Um, and that is something that is particularly hard, I think, for people who have been successful throughout their lives and people who are kind of the people who can run the race. Um, and pull an all nighter in college. I always say anybody who pulled an all nighter in college is probably going to have a hard time transitioning to the sleep deprivation of the newborn stage, because you remember that really nice, like, ooh, I did this, I stayed up and I went and passed my test, and it felt triumphant. But I've worked with so many parents who say that and then they're like, I was not ready for 4 days in a row of sleep deprivation, of only
With no
getting a few
triumph.
hours of sleep, with no sense of triumph, with actually a sense of failure because, hey, you didn't get your baby to sleep, hey, you didn't get yourself to sleep. And so there is this moment of honesty of like you said, you're not going to get the same amount of sleep as 25-year-old you. You're not going to get to make this big, beautiful meal for your partner's birthday or your anniversary or something. Sometimes it's going to be, hey, I have 400 things to do that day. So we're going to celebrate our anniversary on Tuesday. My husband has not been home for the last two birthdays for me and for my son. And he was gone on Valentine's Day and he was gone on our wedding anniversary. And so um, those are moments where an actual conversation has to be had. And I did not care at all about him being gone on Valentine's Day or our anniversary. However, I do care about him being gone on my birthday. So we're going to celebrate in a different way. I do care about him being present for my son's birthday party and being present for what that looks like. And so I do think there's this really important moment of evaluating what is important to you and what is going to matter. Like, I don't care if the dishwasher needs to be loaded sometimes. It's okay. The plates can sit in the sink just a few minutes longer. But food stuck to the kitchen floor is going to drive me bonkers.
But the
So,
thing is like some people might be bothered by the dishwasher. So when you're talking about the realm of rest, you're talking about the realm of rejuvenation and how expectations like work into that, you have to look at it from a perspective of those have to be defined. And
yes.
moving the goalpost is not a failure.
No.
changing expectations from what you had 6 months ago, or what you had 2 weeks ago, or what you had three months ago. That is the definition of when you know better, you do better.
Yes, I think that's such an important phrase because are you're constantly learning and growing as a human. I would hope so, at least. You're getting feedback from your entire environment, whether or not it's your partner, whether or not it's yourself, and that's a big deal. And so if there was one thing that I would communicate is that I would want people to understand the difference between rest and rejuvenation, and I would want them to be able to be honest with themselves. um, and I hear an infant. So we're going to wrap it up there, and I'm going to prioritize my own sense of rest and get my baby to nap on time so that he's not ridiculous for the rest of the day. But I just wanted to say, I think you're a wonderful mom. I think keeping your expectations together is important in order to feel like a good mom. Um, so I'm just glad to have this conversation.
Yeah. You're a great mom. Okay, bye.
Bye.